Hello, welcome to my podcast, Crime, Mystery, History and Mayhem. My name is Kate and here I talk about true crime, history and anything that tickles my fancy. If you like history, true crime and random stories that usually relate to those two genres, then you have come to the right place. I also have a YouTube channel if you would like to watch me deliver my stories. I pop up pictures and it's an experience. Please support my YouTube channel by hitting the like button, subscribing, and pressing the notification bell. I am still reasonably new. My channel is about 9 months old. The length of a pregnancy. And yeah, so I'm still trying to grow it. This way, when you hit the notification bell, you'll be the first to know when I post a new video. And with that, let's jump into another story. So in May of the year 2000, a young woman called Kirsty Jones embarked on a solo trip around the world. She was only 23 years old and full of excitement for this adventure of a lifetime. After recently graduating from the University of Liverpool with a degree in English and Media Studies, Kirsty left her home in Tredyman near Brixton, Wales to embark on a 2-year global adventure. Her travels would take her through Asia, Australia and New Zealand before finishing in South America. But sadly, Kirsty would never make it back to her home alive. So Kirsty Jones was absolutely thrilled to embark on her backpacking adventure. She had worked tirelessly to save up just enough money to fund her journey by doing odd jobs. Once she got on the road, she was determined to make the most of her experience by seeking the cheapest accommodation possible. Despite facing some obstacles along the way, Kirsty remained joyful and optimistic, soaking up every moment of her adventure with pure delight. Her adventure was a true reflection of the joy that comes from following your dreams, and Kirsty was living proof of that. Wow, Kirsty seems to have had such an amazing adventure. After 3 months of travelling, she headed 435 miles north of Bangkok to the wonderful trekking hub of Chiang Mai. While there, she explored the jungle, she rode elephants, and even met hill tribes. Chiang Mai is such a cool place. It's the largest city in northern Thailand, and it is famous for its beautiful Buddhist temples and chill vibe. Lots of tourists from all over the world go there. They love it. Kirsty decided to stay at the Ari guest house during her trip. It was a really cheap option. It was only £1 per night, but unfortunately she didn't know that it wasn't the safest place for her to stay alone. The guest house had a really bad reputation, and the previous year it was actually closed for 6 months because another traveller had passed away from an overdose. It can be tough to find affordable accommodations when you're travelling, especially when money is really tight. And the Ari guest house was cheap and somewhere to lay her head at night. Kirsty, like many others, made the decision to stay there despite being young and not very experienced. It's understandable that she needed to be mindful of her budget, and the Ari guest house provided an option that she could afford. So Kirsty settled into her room on the ground floor, and she became aware that there were other guests that were staying at the guest house that night. There were at least 8 other guests, including the owner, who was Andrew Gill, and Surin Chan Pranate, who was managing the guest house while also running a massage school on the upstairs area of the building. So Kirsty was very curious about the other guests and their stories. She learned that Stuart Crichton, an Australian man, had a reputation for street fighting and was later arrested for possessing heroin and cannabis. Yeah, so he had that stuff found in his room. Glenn, another guest, described himself as an ex-Mormon and former CIA spy who had come to Thailand to recover from a head injury that he sustained in a car accident. There was Nathan Foley. He was 27 years old and he's from Australia. He was passing through on his way to England to visit his relatives in Kent for the very first time. Meanwhile, Stephen Trigg, a 27-year-old British backpacker, had been on the road for 4 years before he arrived at the guest house and decided that he was going to stay there for a while. He needed a break from driving. Kirsty was fascinated by the diverse backgrounds and experiences that the other guests had. In total, there were 6 foreigners and 2 Thai men staying at the guest house that night. It was a unique and interesting group of people, all with their own stories to tell. Kirsty had a lovely evening at the guest house where she met Nathan Foley, a friendly Australian man who was on his way to visit his relatives in England. They had dinner together and Kirsty enjoyed his company. Later, she went to her room feeling happy and grateful for making a nice new friend. So in the early hours of August the 10th, Stephen Trigg was jolted awake by the sound of Kirsty's voice. It was piercing through the silence. From her room, he heard her crying out in terror. She was saying, "Leave me alone, leave me alone, get off me, get off me." The urgency and intensity of her cries, they sent shivers down his spine. It was evident that something really bad was happening to Kirsty. Stephen was deeply concerned and he was scared for her, so he immediately went to the manager of the place to share his concerns about the yelling. They both decided to check on Kirsty, but they didn't want to disturb her just in case she was having a heated argument with someone. Sadly, they were unaware that something more serious was happening behind that door. The next morning, the other guests began their day, but Kirsty was nowhere to be seen. She had not shown up for breakfast and no one had heard from her. Later that afternoon, a maid entered Kirsty's room. She went in there to clean it and she discovered a scene so horrific that it left everyone shaken to the core. The details of the tragedy were not immediately clear and the authorities were notified. The investigation into Kirsty's fate began, and her loved ones and the other guests that were there were left to wonder what could have happened to her. Kirsty was found laying motionless, face down in her room. It was apparent that she had been attacked and lost her life. She had been strangled to death with a piece of fabric that was still around her neck when her body was found. She had been raped and sodomized. The situation was distressing for everyone there. Also, when the police arrived, they found that several people had already entered the room, including a Thai television camera crew. That annoys me. They had no business going in there while Kirsty's body lay half naked. So apparently everyone in the community was talking about the dead foreigner who was found in a room at the RE. And guess what? Curious community members and journalists showed up to the guest house and let themselves into her room while she was in there. The journalists were all over the place, trying to get the best shots for their photos. That's right, they were snapping pictures while Kirsty lay there deceased. And they were messing with the crime scene. I don't understand why a film crew would think that it was okay to go into a murder scene. It's so morally wrong. Plus, the crime scene has been significantly compromised due to the repeated entry and exit of multiple individuals. Unfortunately, this led to the contamination of vital evidence, which had severe implications in the investigation. The disturbance of forensic evidence such as fingerprints, DNA samples, and other physical traces of the crime made it more challenging to identify and prosecute any suspects. The lack of proper measures to secure the crime scene resulted in the loss of valuable information that could have been used to prosecute Kirsty's attacker. Also, these despicable individuals who went into her room, they published photos of Kirsty's body in the newspapers. She lay there, partially naked, R-worded, and broken, while they just snapped pictures. As the investigation into the tragic death of Kirsty unfolded, the details surrounding the event became increasingly muddled and perplexing, leaving authorities grappling with unanswered questions. As more information came to light, the circumstances of her demise grew more suspicious, raising red flags and prompting further scrutiny. Also, during the investigation of Kirsty's death, detectives uncovered a significant development. So the maid, the one who had cleaned Kirsty's room, she claimed that she discovered Kirsty's body at about 4 p.m. Yeah, so later that day, she said that she lied. She revealed that she had been coerced into giving a false statement. This revelation enabled the authorities to scrutinize the circumstances surrounding Kirsty's death more closely. Following this new development, the police suspected the hotel manager, Surin, as the individual who discovered her body about 5 hours before it was officially reported. It is deeply concerning that there was such a delay in reporting Kirsty's death. It's hard to understand why it was kept quiet for more than 5 hours. It looks really bad for the manager, that's for sure. It's just really disturbing to learn that there was such a delay. I can't understand it. It's hard to comprehend. Like, why was it kept quiet for so long? I'm a major skeptic, and immediately I'm thinking it's the manager who killed her. But perhaps he was just overwhelmed by the situation and didn't know how to react. Or maybe he was afraid of the consequences of reporting it. It's also possible that there were more sinister motives behind the delay. And that is exactly what I'm thinking. What do you think? Let me know in the comments section if you watch this on my YouTube channel. But regardless of the reason, I can only imagine how difficult this must be for those who knew Kirsty and are now trying to come to terms with her extremely tragic loss. It's just very, very sad. It's truly heartbreaking that Kirsty had to go through such a tragic and inhumane death. So eventually, her body was taken away to be examined. The coroner actually found semen on Kirsty's body that could potentially lead to the identification of her attacker. That was great news, right? They got DNA. But only if the perpetrator was in the system, of course. If they're not in the system, then it doesn't really help. So the police collected this DNA evidence and they sent it for further testing. This evidence could have been a significant breakthrough in the investigation, bringing the perpetrator to justice and giving Kirsty's family some much needed closure. But there's always a but. Despite the Thai police's initial confidence in the identification of 8 prime suspects for the murder of Kirsty, their investigation hit a roadblock. And it would hit many roadblocks. Because when they ran DNA tests on each of the suspects, none of them matched. What a pain! They did not match the DNA evidence that was found on Kirsty's body. Also, the Thai police were unwavering in their conviction that the perpetrator of this heinous crime could not have been a Thai national. They based this assumption on their assessment that the act was far too brutal and inhumane for any person from Thailand to be capable of committing such an atrocity. They are delusional. However, this assumption was challenged by some people who felt that the police were being ignorant and that such a crime could be committed by anyone, regardless of their nationality. Thai police then turned their attention to Andrew Gill. He's the owner of the guest house. They honed in on him because just 2 days after Kirsty was killed, Andrew, who had been living in Thailand for 12 years, just disappeared, which drew a lot of attention to him. Subsequently, the authorities located him at a bar and they took him into custody. Although DNA testing was conducted on Andrew, his sample did not match the DNA that was on Kirsty's body. Andrew attempted to justify his disappearance following the murder by asserting that he did not want the authorities to discover that his visa had expired 2 years earlier. That's why he left. However, he was fined £33 for his visa's expiration and he was deported. Despite this, the authorities remained unyielding in their determination to prosecute him, even though the DNA did not match him. According to the police, Andrew was taken into custody after the authorities gathered scientific evidence and witness statements. The police department expressed confidence in their investigation and stated that they were certain they were heading in the right direction. They weren't. Despite the DNA evidence not matching, they kept thinking he was responsible. Andrew had made a life-changing decision by selling his house in Andorra and purchasing this hostel. He quickly became a popular figure in the area. Everyone liked him, and he was super friendly. But despite his popularity, Andrew's life took a really dark turn when he was arrested for Kirsty's murder. Andrew's friends would gather around him and they showed him so much support by bringing him food and water while he was in police custody. He was locked up in a cell. People in the area didn't believe that he was responsible. The investigation into Andrew hit a dead end as the police just had no evidence against him. They said they did, but they didn't. Several witnesses confirmed that Andrew was drinking at a local bar on the night of the murder, and the DNA that was found, it just did not match him. As a result, Andrew was released from custody 2 months later. That's right, they kept him for a long time, and the mystery of Kirsty's murder remained unsolved. The question of who committed this crime continued to linger, leaving the community in shock and sorrow. There was a killer on the loose. Next, the police started to think a guy called Abraham Narong, who was a local Burmese tour guide, was a person of interest in this case. Abraham had reportedly led Kirsty and a group of 8 other backpackers on a 3-day hill walking excursion in the beautiful southwestern region of Chiang Mai, Thailand. He was one of the last people to have been seen with Kirsty before she died. According to news reports, Abraham was taken into police custody several days after Kirsty was killed, where he was allegedly subjected to physical violence and coerced into a confession. During the course of his interrogation, the police asked Abraham to provide a semen sample, but for some reason he declined. Subsequently, Abraham made allegations to media that he had been subjected to sexual assault by the interrogators in an attempt to coerce him into providing his sample. The police have not yet publicly released any evidence or information that would link Abraham to the crime, and his family and friends have denied any involvement on his part. I just wish he gave the DNA evidence. I know he doesn't have to, but he could have cleared his name then and there. The case has sent shockwaves across the backpacking community in Thailand and has raised concerns about the safety of solo travellers, especially women in the country. Also, the pressure was on the police to solve Kirsty's case, and some speculate that the police considered using Abraham as a scapegoat. To achieve this, they allegedly intended to tamper with Kirsty's remains by contaminating it with Abraham's DNA, and that's why Abraham didn't want to give the sample over. This would have linked him to her death and allowed the police to close the case. Although such tactics have been used in the past by police all over the world, it is unclear if this is what the Thai police were going to do. Nonetheless, if true, this would be a gross injustice. The police should not resort to such unethical tactics to solve cases. It's just unfair to everyone. It was only due to the protests staged by other tour guides on the street and the international media coverage that the authorities were forced to release Abraham and drop him off on a random street. It is worth mentioning that the police did issue a formal apology for the mistreatment of Abraham. This apology was made at a later time, presumably after an internal review of the situation. However, despite the apology, the investigation into the tragic death of Kirsty seemed to lose momentum after that point. Specifically, it appears that there was a lack of sustained effort in the identifying and bringing to justice the perpetrator responsible for Kirsty's death. Kirsty's death in Thailand in the year 2000 was a tragic loss, and it deeply impacted her family and her friends. Her body was returned home, where a beautiful funeral service was held in her honour. Since then, her loved ones have been working so hard to find and bring her killer to justice, but unfortunately, despite their efforts, no one has been found guilty. This has been a painful and frustrating experience for everyone involved. Kirsty's family and friends have been left to grapple with the unbearable sense of loss, while the community back in Thailand, where Kirsty was killed, has been left with a deep sense of unease. A few years after Kirsty died, Sue, her mum, embarked on a journey to Thailand with Kirsty's brother Gareth to visit the place where they lost her. The trip was emotionally challenging for Sue, who was still struggling to come to terms with the loss of her beloved daughter. Nevertheless, Sue's optimistic spirit kept her going and gave her the strength to make this trip. Despite the pain, Sue was determined to find some sort of closure and gain a better understanding of the circumstances surrounding her daughter's death. Then, in 2006, Tony Blair, who was Prime Minister of England at the time, used his influence to press the Prime Minister of Thailand to urge the authorities to conduct a more thorough investigation into Kirsty's case. The case had been dormant, and people back in the UK were really frustrated by the little progress made by the Thai officials. Tony Blair's appeal proved to be a turning point, and Thai authorities were forced to take a closer look at this case, and their efforts led to a breakthrough. So DNA tests were conducted, and the results conclusively proved that the perpetrator was indeed a Thai national, even though the Thai police said a person from Thailand would never do this. This revelation was a crucial development in this case, and it helped establish a sense of accountability which had been absent up until then. The incident highlights the critical role that international cooperation can play in solving complex criminal cases. It also underscores the importance of political leaders using their influence to bring about positive change. The intervention of Tony Blair in this case not only helped push the case, but also strengthened the ties between the UK and Thailand. Then, 11 years after Kirsty was killed, so we've gone 11 years, they still haven't got the killer, the Welsh police had been investigating her case, and they discovered a YouTube video. It was titled "Murder of Welsh Tourist Covered Up by Thai Tourist Police." This video was uploaded by an Australian man who provided evidence of a potential suspect in the murder case. He urged the Thai police to investigate a Thai professor from Chiang Mai University who was seen around the RE guest house during the time that Kirsty was killed. This suspect was identified as the younger brother of the inspector of the tourist police. So the video raises concerns about the Thai police's handling of the case, suggesting that they were trying to cover it up. The guy who posted the video believes that the suspect had influential connections within the Thai police department, which was hindering the investigation. The Welsh police shared this information with the Thai authorities and requested that they investigate this matter. However, they did not receive any response from the Thai authorities. The Australian man's allegations, coupled with the apparent lack of interest from the Thai police, raised a lot of concerns about the integrity of the Thai justice system. Then, the year 2012 saw the convening of a second meeting between Welsh detectives and Thai officers who came together to review the forensic evidence. So, Kirsty's mum accompanied the officers on their trip to Thailand to make an impassioned plea for any information that could aid in the investigation. The devastating death of Kirsty, it has left her loved ones and the UK authorities with a deep sense of sorrow. And despite their best efforts, justice has not yet been served. It is a matter of great concern that the perpetrator of this crime is yet to be identified, and the efforts and determination of the Welsh detectives is commendable. I just wish that the Thai officials cared as much. It is also important to note that a reward of £10,000 was offered to anyone who could provide valuable information that could lead to an arrest in this case. The reward was advertised through various channels, including social media, news outlets, and posters in public places. Despite the widespread knowledge of the reward information, no new leads or suspects were identified. The authorities hoped that by offering a substantial reward, they could encourage witnesses or individuals with information to come forward and provide valuable leads that could aid in this investigation. We need to find out who killed Kirsty. They need to go to prison. But unfortunately, despite the substantial reward and widespread advertising, the investigation remained at a standstill. Thai law's 20-year limit on investigating cases means the country's police will now be unable to arrest anyone for Kirsty's murder, even if new information does come to light. So after 2 decades of working tirelessly for justice, her mum Sue has spoken out against this law and revealed her anguish at the thought that her daughter's killer may never be put behind bars. Every day she's in her family's thoughts and they miss Kirsty so much. And that is today's story. Please do check out my YouTube channel. I have literally got hundreds of stories over there. I am also on Instagram, Patreon, and TikTok under Crime, Mystery, History, and Mayhem, except for Facebook, where I am under the username Kate Sharon. I hope we are all having a lovely day. Be nice to each other, be kind, and have a wonderful, wonderful day. Goodbye.